U.S. has made a major blunder, in my view, the weakest foreign policy team probably in U.S. history. The U.S. Has blundered by weaponizing the dollar. We use economic sanctions. Will we overuse economic sanctions? The U.S. did use economic sanctions against Iran in 2011, 2012. But U.S. economic sanctions only work if three conditions are met. Number one, the target has to be a small to medium-sized economy. Number two, the target has no alternative payment channels. They don't have anywhere else to go. Number three, they don't have a lot of hard currency or gold. None of these conditions apply to Russia. The United States is imposing sanctions on Russia in connection with the Ukrainian war. Our sanctions are going to fail. And two, they will worse than fail. They will actually boomerang and hurt the United States more than they hurt Russia. Russian growth for 2023, when I wrote this, projected at 2.1%. U.S. probably a little bit lower than that. The latest statistics, this just came through in a matter of days, the Russian economy is projected to grow 5% in the fourth quarter, an annualized rate of 5% in the fourth quarter. The U.S. will be lucky to get kind of 1.5, 2. The ruble was constant at 70 for most of the past year and a half. It's a little weaker right now, but that's because there's a little bit of inflation in Russia. The Russian economy is suffering labor shortages. They are on a full war footing. All the factories are full. They're also making advances in technology. In other words, everything that we were going, Biden said, we're going to crush the ruble, we're going to crush the Russian economy. Janet Yellen, who knows nothing about what we're talking about right now, was echoing the same thing as one guy, Wally Adeyemo, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. He's a good lawyer, smart guy, knows sanctions, but doesn't know anything about economics, so you don't really learn anything about how sanctions work in the real world and how easy they are to get around. So it has been a complete failure. And importantly, Brazil, China, India, Turkey, Malaysia, Iran, and the UAE, and many other nations, and some are friends of the United States, I don't dispute that, but they have refused to join the sanctions. I mean, sanctions only work if, most of the countries in the world join you, but a lot of really important countries have not. They're not anti-U.S., but they're just, not our war in Ukraine, not our business. We want to do business, and we're not joining the sanctions. So I would say that the U.S. effort to weaponize the dollar, one metaphor is, how many times can you hit the punching bag before the punching bag gets up and walks out of the room? And that's what has happened. The BRICS have said enough with your sanctions, and in particular, the seizure of the assets of the Central Bank of Russia. That was unprecedented. We did that with Iran and North Korea and a few others, but much less important. But Russia was a very big deal. Okay, so I talked about the weaponization of the dollar. De-dollarization is best understood as the response to the weaponization of the dollar. Again, the big blow, the U.S. Treasury seized Russian securities, Russia's U.S. Treasury securities. Russia had invested a lot of its hard currency reserves in U.S. Treasury securities, about $230 billion worth. Russia, very wisely, I always say Elvira Nabiullina, who's the head of the Central Bank of Russia, as far as I can tell, she's the only central banker in the world who actually knows what she's doing. But she spent the last 10 years buying 2,000 metric tons of gold, actually more than that. Russia's gold went from 600 metric tons to almost 3,000 metric tons over the course of the last 11 years. It's up to 25% of Russia's total reserves are in gold. This is physical gold in Russia, not digital. You can't freeze it. You can't seize it. The United States can't do anything about it. So that was a great insurance policy and a great cushion that she engineered. But the one thing that most troubles me right now, we have technically frozen those Russian assets, the securities. They're all in digital form. I would say that the dollar is the best cryptocurrency in the world. It's all digital. The Treasury and the Fed keep the ledger. The Russians can't do it. But we haven't actually converted it. We haven't said we're seizing it. We've said we froze it. Now there's a movement in the United States to actually either take the Russian securities or maybe just the interest that they pay and basically seize that money, take it over, and then use it to pay for the war in Ukraine. People think it's a very clever idea. This will do more damage to global confidence in the dollar than anything else I can imagine. More than inflation, more than money printing, and all the things people talk about. If you do that, first of all, you're defaulting on U.S. Treasury securities. Russia earned the money, they bought them, we took them, and now we're going to convert them to our own use. That's a default. I don't care what you call it. And it may be a selective default, but it's still a default. If you're Saudi Arabia or perhaps UAE or China or any other country, you're looking at this, you're saying, hey, what if the U.S. wakes up and decides they don't like what I'm doing? They don't like my policy. They don't like my approach to a certain situation, whatever it may be. What if they do it to me? Well, if you do it to Russia, it's a pretty powerful country, 12th largest economy in the world, largest nuclear arsenal. Who wouldn't they do it to? And the answer is no one. So at that point, you're driven to get out of the dollar. It's not that you hate the dollar, you absolutely don't want dollars, but for your own preservation, you have to move to other asset classes. And of course, are you really better off with the euro? Probably not, because the euro is a little bit of a lackey to the United States. So what you really want, you may want your own currency in the end, and that's what the BRICS currency is about, but in the short run, you'll want gold, physical gold, because they can't take it. There are de-dollarization talks underway. All these bilateral talks, and they may make some progress, and I think the most progress I've seen is between Brazil and China, where China agrees to take rice for what Brazil buys, and vice versa. The Brazilians will take the yuan if they sell Embraer aircraft or soybeans, as the case may be. But the key to any of that is, if you're the seller, what do you do with the money, right? You're Russia, you sell oil to India, and they pay you in rupees. What are you going to do with the rupees? I mean, how much curry do you actually need? The answer is probably not much, and you can have the rupees in the bank account that doesn't have to go through SWIFT, but you can't do anything with it. And that's the limitation on any bilateral transaction currency arrangement. Even China, Russia, I mean, what's Russia going to do with the yuan? Well, they can go shopping in China to a certain extent, but that's very limited. What you need, the key to a new currency, and this kind of comes back to the BRICS, you need a large membership. You need 20 or 30 countries. There are only 19 members of the euro, and it's a very successful reserve and transaction currency. So what the BRICS did in Johannesburg, I'm enough of a geek. There's a 24-page single-spaced communique. I read the whole thing. It barely mentions the new currency. It just mentions it in passing in one little place, not much at all. And people said, hey, Jim, you said there was going to be a big deal about the currency. And I said, well, there was. But the big deal was the expansion of the membership. Because now, let's just say you have 20 or 25 member countries, and you're Russia, and you sell oil to India, and you get paid not in rupees, not in dollars, but in the new BRIC currency. Well, now you can go shopping all over the world. You can buy Brazilian aircraft. You can buy Chinese manufactured goods. You can buy technology from India, et cetera. And that's the key to a successful transaction currency, and that's exactly the path the BRICS are going down by expanding the size of the group. So this brings us to the BRICS 11 currency union. How will this actually work? Well, the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is that a single BRIC, I'm calling it a BRIC, I don't know what they're going to call it, John Maynard Keynes called it the Bancor. He had the same idea in 1944, by the way. One unit will be worth a weight of gold, and that's the key thing. Not an amount in dollars. There won't be a BRIC dollar exchange rate. It'll be a weight of gold, and it could be an ounce, could be a kilo, I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. The math is the same, and the dynamics are the same. And now you have this new currency. It's defined as a weight of gold. It's called whatever they want to call it, but that's the key, is the weight. This new BRIC currency will be a valid medium for exports, imports, settlement of trade balances, et cetera. Reserve currency status will take longer. A lot of people they're either not familiar or don't make the distinction between a transaction currency and a reserve currency. It could be the same currency, but they're two entirely different functions. Reserve currency is much more difficult. That can wait for the future, but transaction currency, when we were kids, we traded with baseball cards and bottle caps. The BRICS currency will do just fine. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. I'm going to spend a minute on what the BRICS currency is not, because you hear this quite a bit. There's not going to be a petro-yuan. The oil is not going to be priced in yuan, maybe on a small scale on a bilateral basis, but that's not coming. There's no petro-ruble. Those currencies don't have wide acceptance. They don't really have reserve potential. It's a whole, we can spend an hour on why they don't, but take my word for it. And there's a problem with the rule of law. Does anyone really trust China or Russia when it comes to the rule of law? This will not be a new gold standard. If you have a BRICS currency, you're not going to be able to march down to the People's Bank of China and say, hey, give me some gold. They're not going to do that. As a matter of fact, the BRICS don't even need gold. The only country in the world, the only two countries that even come close to having enough gold to back a currency are Switzerland and Russia, but even they fall short. You need a lot more gold to back a currency with it. So it's not a new gold standard.